Hello, my name is Zephyr. I have a special treat for those of you who love a good ghost story. This video is kind of building off my last spooky video where I tell you about my weird childhood memory about a weird elevator button at the cemetery and how it doesn't actually exist. This video is just as personal for me because in that video I mentioned that the reason for my family and I going to that cemetery was for my grandpa's funeral. Keep in mind, this happened about 20 years ago, something I didn't really specify in that last video. Anyway, the reason I bring it up is because this little ghost story or experience has to do with my grandpa. You see, at some point, we ended up going back to the cemetery to pick up his ashes because he was cremated. We've had his urn ever since, and I've noticed that because of this, he's always had some sort of presence in every house that we lived in. I didn't say this was going to be a bad ghost story. If anything, it's kind of wholesome. Like he's still kicking around with us. So, what are these ghostly experiences that I have? Well, the main one that I can replicate right now whilst recording this video is this. As you can see, we usually keep this door on a stopper because without it, the door will close completely by itself. Notice that this only seems to happen in the room where we keep him. None of the other rooms or doors throughout the house do this. I've tried thinking of logical explanations on what causes the door to close on its own. Like maybe the wind is hitting it, or the house was built at an angle that causes only this door to close. But all of that gets debunked by the little fact that this has been an occurrence in every house that we have lived in ever since we've had his urn. And in every house, no matter which room we put him in, the door to that room would always have this effect where it would slowly close on its own. That would be one hell of a coincidence if in every one of those houses, we always just happen to put him in a room that has a vent blowing towards the door. It's not impossible, but very unlikely. Just as further proof that none of the air coming from that vent is causing the door to close on its own, look at how far away it is and the fact that none of them are actually facing towards the door. So it's definitely not the air that's causing the door to close. It's clear that he still frequents my grandma, as during times of stress, she'll make remarks stating that she saw him or straight up have a conversation with no one else in the room. Possibly as a way of trying to comfort her. He passed away when I was really young, so I never really got a chance to know him. Though there are times I can sense his presence, like he tries to make contact with me. It mostly happens when I'm alone in the house. I'll on occasion hear what sounds like a man talking in a very muffled voice, and I'll feel like I'm being watched. My most recent and my most notable visit was when my grandma was in the hospital. She had a ton of fluid in her lungs and it caused her heart to fail. She's alive and well now, but during her stay in the hospital, I spent a couple nights alone in the house. One of those nights scared me to my very core because I heard her inside the house talking to that male voice that I told you about. And I started crying, not because I was hearing voices, but because my mind immediately went to the worst case scenario, and that the reason I was hearing her voice was because something unfortunate happened at the hospital, and at that point, I was just waiting for the phone call. Thankfully, nothing happened, and she's back to normal, and so far, I have yet to hear the muffled voice of the man in some time. I explained everything that was happening to my girlfriend, who was a really big help in that whole situation, and she told me that it could have been an astral projection of my grandma coming to visit me and ending up having a conversation with my grandpa. Hearing that comforted me a lot, and I choose to believe that was the case, and I hope they had a nice conversation. My final strange experience that I have occurs every other night, and it's something that started recently. Though this one can be logically explained by a lot of different things, which is why I saved it for last. At night when I'm just about to fall asleep and enter REM sleep, I'll suddenly be woken up and catch a shadow whiz past my face and a downward motion from top right to lower left of my vision. It's at this time I'd like to point out that I sleep in probably the worst position you could possibly sleep in, and I know damn well it's very bad for you, but I don't care because it's comfy. A position that's known to cause your eyes to move in weird ways, and that's caused people to suffocate to death. So, yeah. That alone sounds like the cause of what I'm experiencing, and I can practically see all the med school kids screaming, "Well, just sleep in a better position, you idiot." That and plain old sleep paralysis. There has been only one instance where I've seen a proper shadow figure in the perfect silhouette of a human looming over my grandma in her chair. And it wasn't until I caught it standing next to her that it ran slightly before vanishing. For context, when she was fresh out of the hospital, I decided to sleep in her bed in the same room as her just to monitor her and to make sure that she doesn't fall again, because that is what caused us to take her to the hospital in the first place. And the reason why she fell was because we discovered that she had a shit ton of fluid in her lungs and she could not breathe, and it was causing her to barely be able to function at all. Like, I'm surprised she was able to stand. Semantics aside, you don't need the whole explanation. You probably don't even care. Point being is, it wasn't until I started sharing a room with her that I noticed a actual proper shadow figure. I mainly wanted to focus on the door of the room my grandpa's kept in, as that's the only real piece of ghost activity I'm really able to capture. I wasn't able to capture this happening in any of the other houses because obviously I don't live in them anymore. Being said, I thank you all very much for watching, and if you have any ghost stories of your own, leave them down in the comments. Let's start a little ghost story feed. I have one more interesting and kind of creepy video I'd like to make, so of course, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you can be notified when I make that video. And I'm thinking about turning this into a little series, so if I can think of any more weird experiences that I've had, I'll definitely make a video on them.